The mission is simple: to help high achievers naturally eliminate emotional and physical obstacles so they can optimize their life for higher achievement. Welcome. You have just entered the Genesis Zone. Good day and welcome to the Genesis Zone show. This is Dr. Brian Brown. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this beautiful Thursday. Have you or someone you know ever gone through early menopause and you just wondered why it happened so much earlier than the rest of your friends? Or have you ever had a family history of it and you're not there yet, but you're wondering if it's going to happen to you? Well, have you ever taken an antidepressant and couldn't tolerate them? Or have you ever known someone to be diagnosed with prostate cancer and wondered what the latest science was telling us about treatment of prostate cancer? Well, we'll be talking about this and more today in the Genesis Zone show. First up is an interesting little tidbit that I wanted to lead off with. Now, this is an older study. It came out in 2007, but I literally just ran across it. It's crazy. I try to stay well-read on all the studies, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of studies that get published every single day. So it's almost impossible to keep up with all of them. But this one popped up on my radar screen just this week. And in 2007, a study where laboratory rats were forced to choose between artificial sweeteners or cocaine, 94% of the laboratory rats chose non-caloric sweeteners, the artificial sweeteners, even if they showed signs to dependence on the cocaine. Holy cow, that's mind-blowing. I mean, we've known that there are correlation studies between, say, heroin and cocaine and sugar. Okay, we've seen those studies. We've seen PET scans where the same areas of the brain light up with sugar as it does for heroin or cocaine. We've known that. But this is artificial sweeteners. We think, okay, there's 0 calories here. There's no way that it can be causing this similar issue. But when laboratory rats were given a choice, they actually chose the artificial sweetener over the cocaine. It makes me wonder how innocent these artificial sweeteners really are. Until now, I'm not sure I had proof from the studies of how addictive they were. But I think even though this was done with in rat models and not human models, I think the next thing up, there are probably going to be some PET scan studies similar to the heroin and sugar and the cocaine and sugar studies that have been done in the years past. But this is something that I've seen clinically for years. I have people say that, okay, I've switched over to artificial sweeteners. I'm no longer using sugar, but I find that I need more and more and more of the artificial sweeteners. And I didn't understand it until now. So I've known that artificial sweeteners raise insulin levels. That's been a commonly known fact for about 7 years now. And ultimately, because they raise insulin levels, they make you store fat. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? So you think this artificial sweetener is supposed to be helping your diet. It's not really helping your diet at all. It's actually making you more fat. There's been several articles written throughout the past few years about, diet drinks actually make people fat. And there's some truth to that because it raises insulin levels. So now we know that these artificial sweeteners are very, very, very addictive. Crazy random factoid. But the whole more addictive than cocaine thing is new. It goes to show how much more powerful these chemicals, and they are chemicals, these artificial sweeteners are at stimulating dopamine and endorphin in the pleasure centers of the brain than cocaine is. Wonder what would happen if artificial sweeteners got put on the DEA's illicit drug list. Just asking. Next up is menopause genes. I want to talk to you about menopause and genes. This is the latest research that came out just this past week. And the title of it was Genomic Analysis Identifies Variants that Can Predict the Timing of Menopause. It was in Nature Journal. I'll actually publish a link to that later in the comments section below. Okay, researchers in the UK have been looking at hundreds of thousands of genetic samples of women from Europe, Central Europe, and from Asia. And I think all total, there were around 300,000 genetic samples that they looked at. And these were women who had naturally entered menopause. It wasn't because of surgical reasons. They just naturally segued into menopause. As they termed it, it was age of natural menopause, or ANM, as they called it in the study. They found 290 gene SNP locations associated with early menopause. Now, previously, scientists in the early unlocking the human genome research, they had discovered about 5 times less gene SNPs than that. So this is 5 times more gene SNPs than they ever thought or imagined. I suspect they're probably going to find more as time evolves. But right now we have 290 known gene SNP locations that are associated with early menopause. Here's the interesting thing. The impact on the surface, the impact was relatively small per gene SNP. So if you take one or a little cluster of gene SNPs, it may only increase your chances of early menopause about 3.5 weeks in the lowest end, and up to 1.5 years on the higher end. Now you think, okay, what's the impact of early menopause? Well, the impact of early menopause is decline in hormones throughout the body causes a whole host of problems with brain structure changes, with cardiovascular structure changes, with bone structure changes, muscle structure changes. And subsequently, when all that rolled into a big ball, your metabolism changes drastically. Okay. I think if you've ever been through menopause, or you've known somebody who's been through menopause, you don't have to say the word metabolism very much before they go, yeah, I'm there. In my opinion, this level of research is still in its infancy, but it's a huge step in the right direction. I mean, sequencing out these gene SNPs associated with early menopause and finding their locations on the human genome is the first step to understanding the aging process, or unlocking the aging process. I mean, let's face it, whether it's natural menopause or surgically induced menopause, where we receive a hormone decline, those hormone declines can take a major toll on accelerating the aging process. So the way I look at it is this: if we can begin to sequence the menopause genes and understand who has early menopause and who doesn't, then we can put interventions in place earlier. We can begin to handle on one critical aspect of the aging process, or get a handle on one of the critical aspects of the aging process, and possibly be able to positively impact the presentation and occurrence of age-related illnesses like Alzheimer's and heart disease and things like that, osteoporosis, as well as understanding the processes involved and the targets for future intervention. So the first step is the sequencing of the human genome. And right now we understand there are 290 gene SNPs involved in this. In the meantime, epigenetically, what we have to do is alter the human environment by doing bioidentical hormone replacement, as I've done for years personally and professionally with my clients. Bioidentical hormone replacement is the answer right now that we have in order to get a grasp on this and slow the process of aging down. I never use the term anti-aging. I don't believe there's such a thing. I don't think we can reverse the hands of time. I don't think we can stop the hands of time, but I do think we can slow it down. And bioidentical hormones plays a key role in that. And it is, by all practical purposes, an epigenetic modification of the body as a whole. So here's another little tidbit, switching gears. Research has found that people who eat a diet rich in vitamin K have up to a 34% lower risk of atherosclerosis-related cardiovascular disease, which can affect the heart and blood vessels. So the bottom line is, eat your green leafy vegetables. It just may save your life. All right. All right. Next up, let's switch gears to depression treatment failure and what you can do about it. A study published just this week was titled this. It's a long title, so bear with me. Perceived burden of antidepressant side effects predict poor treatment outcome as early as 4 days after treatment, but frequency and intensity of side effects do not. The researchers go on to say the burden of side effects don't decrease throughout treatment course, but frequency and intensity of side effects do. So again, I'll publish the link. This was also in Nature Journal. Last week, we talked about the link between depression and certain diet types. This week, I want to add to that conversation since we've been kind of talking about depression. Major depressive disorder has a significant economic, emotional, and physical impact on those who struggle with it. And if you look at the statistics, the job statistics as a whole, major depressive disorder has an economic impact on the workforce as well, in the billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, many times, well-intentioned health professionals automatically, by default, prescribe one of a myriad of antidepressants when a person comes in with depressive symptoms. They may not even have meet the clinical criteria for major depressive disorder, but if they present with depressive symptoms, many times a well-intentioned health professional is going to prescribe an antidepressant. For those who followed me for any length of time, you know that for 16 years, I was on a battery of 9 different antidepressants. I never could really tolerate any of them well, which is the reason I had to try so many. A study published last week in Translational Psychiatry stated that medication side effects negatively impact treatment outcomes for those who struggle with depression. They found that even though frequency or intensity of these side effects may decrease over time, the burden of the side effects to the individual persisted and actually worsened over time. Now, the burden was also the reason that study participants considered the medication a failure as early as 4 days after they got off the medication. From my own personal experience, that about sums it up. I got to be honest with you. I experienced that. I went through that. So what is a person to do in this particular scenario where they've tried antidepressants, they're not getting any headway with them, they're having more side effects than they can dream of, and the burden of those side effects just weighs heavily on them. Their quality of life, in other words, is lower than it was before they got on the antidepressant. Well, I can tell you what helped me, and I can tell you what I use to help a countless number of my clients, and that is genetic testing. When you understand your genetic blueprint, then you can put a plan in place to nutritionally support your genes so that they function at their highest level. And once you do that, depression starts to naturally resolve. Now, I will be honest with you, those who've dealt with depression for decades, okay, it tends to resolve more methodically and more slowly. You eventually get there. It just takes longer. In other words, we didn't get here overnight. We're probably not going to reverse it overnight. That's a critical point to understand. All right. Now, the flip side of that is what I've also found. If a person has not dealt with depression their entire life, and they've only dealt with it in a very short period of time, 1, 2, 3 years, then typically we're able to get a handle on that and reverse it very rapidly and get really good rapid results. So the earlier you are in the process, the better off you're going to be. All right. Last up is a prostate cancer update. So the title of the study is this: social environment is a key factor in the risk of developing prostate cancer. All right. This study comes out of the European Journal of Epidemiology. Again, I'll post the link later. They published the results of a meta-analysis of the data for prostate cancer. Now, what is a meta-analysis? A meta-analysis just simply means that a lot of individual studies were looked at to create a whole new study. So what they did is they pooled all of the data from 12 different studies, and they came up with a total of 14,000 men who were newly diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, in comparison, they had a control group of 12,000 men who were healthy and did not have prostate cancer. So this was actually a very good meta-analysis design study. If you want my opinion, I think it was well done, well structured, because we have this control group over here of healthy men to compare to. Now, the study found that men who were widowers were more likely, significantly more likely, to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, when I read that, I was like, holy cow, this fits with the show that I did several weeks back, where I talked about loneliness being the new killer. If you remember from that episode, I talked about loneliness and the genetic impact that it has when it actually modifies loneliness. I'm talking about when loneliness actually modifies the genes that control inflammation. And when a person is lonely and more inflamed, they're more prone to chronic illnesses. And that's what that particular study showed. So if you put two and two together, could this be the case here? Well, personally, even though we don't have the research to back it up, and there does need to be more research to back it up, I personally think it is. I think that is the link, because they specifically pointed out widowers, and widowers typically are lonely. And we know that men who are widowers tend to have higher rates of cardiovascular disease. They have higher rates of falls post loss of a loved one. So there's a series of health consequences that occur. And now we add to that list prostate cancer. But is loneliness the root cause? Is the epigenetic modification that loneliness is causing by increasing inflammation in the body, is that the reason this is happening? It could be, and I think it is. But while we're on the subject of prostate cancer, if you'll allow me for just a moment to get on my proverbial soapbox, for years, for decades, it has been accepted that women get mammogram studies done frequently. Some women need them done annually. Some women need them done every 2 or 3 years. Okay. The actual criteria has changed over time. And we're now learning that women don't necessarily need them every year, but women have had mammograms to diagnose breast cancer for a long time. I propose that men need to have manograms done. And let me explain that. And that's M-A-N-O, not M-A-M-M-O, like a mammogram, a manogram. And what I mean by that is we need to be looking at men's prostates on a regular basis. Okay. PSA, the blood work that we do to detect whether or not there's something going on in the prostate, is not 100% accurate. Okay. It will tell us, hey, there's something going on. Oftentimes, by the time the PSA is detectable, it's more advanced. It's advancing rapidly. And sometimes with aggressive prostate cancer tumors, it can be advanced outside the prostate into the bone and so on and so forth. And that causes a whole host of problems. And then we have this archaic system that literally people, I don't know how to explain this other than just to flat out say it. It's archaic in the fact that it dates back to the 1940s. So our diagnostic criteria, our treatment criteria dates back to the 1940s for men when it comes to prostate cancer. Here's the crazy thing. The American Urological Association came out several years back, and they said, listen, we understand that prostate biopsies, the punch biopsy that's used, that's the archaic thing I'm talking about, or one of the archaic things. We understand they're not that accurate. In fact, if you look at the literature overall, they're about, depends on which study you look at, between 30 and 40% accurate for detecting prostate cancer. Because think about it. If you've got a prostate and you're doing a needle punch biopsy, then you've got spaces where that needle didn't punch. And that could be a tumor lying in those blank spaces. So that's why men get this false sense of security. And men are really notorious for liking to be secure when it comes to prostate cancer and stuff. They go, oh, I had a punch biopsy, everything's normal. Yeah, they said my PSA is elevated, but you know what? I'm not worried about it because Dr. So-and-so did the punch biopsy and it's fine. What they don't realize is that there was literally more than 90% of the prostate that was untouched by a needle. I mean, if you think about that, you think, what are we thinking? Well, the next natural question is well, what can we do about it? Well, that was figured out years ago. I'm talking seven plus years ago, maybe going on 10. I lose track of time, but I've been ordering Tesla 3 MRIs on my prostate cancer suspects for a long time. The American Urological Association says because punch biopsies are so horrible, we actually would rather you do an MRI imaging of the prostate because it's much more diagnostic. We can actually get down at the granular level and see if there's a tumor right there in that prostate organ and that gland. So why aren't we doing Tesla 3 MRIs? And then that brings up the next question. Well, okay, we do find something. How do we biopsy it? Well, guess what? Under Tesla 3 imaging, you can do a guided needle biopsy and go directly to the tumor and biopsy that tumor. Very similar to the way they do with breast, except they don't use a Tesla 3 MRI. They use ultrasound, and they go in with ultrasound right at the source and they biopsy that tumor. The difference between breast and prostate is while they've got that man under the MRI machine, they can literally, and they biopsy to determine that there's cancer there. They can literally go back in with a laser probe and they can zap that tumor and take care of it. Why do we subject men to prostate removal surgeries where they're probably going to spend the rest of their life with incontinence, meaning they use the bathroom on themselves, they have to wear a Depends, they have erectile dysfunction the rest of their life? I don't understand it. It's archaic. The only thing I can think of is that it boils down to economics, because if we remove a punch biopsy procedure from the office practice that's doing those punch biopsies loses a lot of revenue, because there's no revenue in doing an MRI. There's no revenue in doing a laser ablation, a guided needle biopsy and a laser ablation, because insurance doesn't pay for it right now. So patients who do that have to pay cash, and it's not cheap. So Tesla 3 MRI machines are not cheap. They're the most expensive MRI machine on the planet right now. And there's a lot of economic factors that come into play here. I mean, you would literally have to be doing a ton of laser guided needle, Tesla 3 guided needle biopsies and laser ablations in order to make the payment for that Tesla 3 MRI possible. So it boils down to path of least resistance. Let's do it the old way from the 1940s. Let's do a needle punch biopsy. And if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. And we'll just wait and see. They call it watchful waiting. That's the medical terminology. And watchful waiting has been the cause of quite a few deaths throughout the years, because we wait until that cancer has grown and metastasized outside of the organ system that it's in, and then we're in trouble when we could have taken care of that really, really early on. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox now, but I just felt like when we were talking about prostate cancer, and even though we were talking about loneliness, I needed to throw that in here because I don't know who's listening to this that can benefit, but oh my goodness, how we can save lives just by doing MRI imaging of the prostate. Kitschy little name is mammogram. We can do mammograms on men. Do them on a regular basis. You don't have to do them yearly. Do them every 3 years, and do an MRI image of the prostate and kind of see what's going on in there. So that's all I've got for today. If you're feeling like you're not operating at your highest and best performance level, whether it be a physically or emotionally, you've been on that roller coaster of antidepressants and you can't quite figure out why you don't tolerate them well. You still struggle with depression or anxiety, and they still keep trying to change your medications and none of it seems to work. You're curious about knowing your genetic profile so you can start understanding from a natural way how we can actually start treating these things and nutritionally supporting your genes. Then reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram. Just message me, direct message me at Dr. Brian G. Brown. Also, I'm meeting with the team next week, and we're going to be finalizing the date for the relaunch of the Gene Hack Bootcamp. The first boot camp was a major success. We're currently wrapping up the 12-week course that followed that boot camp and getting rave reviews. So thank you to everybody that's been in that. It's been an amazing experience. I've done this one-on-one for years. This was my first foray in teaching it to a group, and the feedback has been excellent, excellent. You're going to want to get on the waiting list for the Gene Hack Bootcamp because I am going to limit space to that. So go to drbriangbrown.com/gene hack, and you can get put on the waiting list for the Gene Hack Bootcamp. In the Gene Hack Bootcamp, I simply go over how to identify which of your 5 zones, I call them Genesis zones, are out of balance. Brain, body, sleep, energy, or immune. From your primary zone, we can then see which genetics need to be checked in order to get you optimized in that zone. That's what you're going to learn in the Gene Hack Bootcamp. So again, direct message me on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Brian G. Brown, or go to drbriangbrown.com/gene hack and get on the early registration, the waiting list for the Gene Hack Bootcamp. Tune in next Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time for our next In the Zone segment, where I'll be sharing the latest research and my insights about that research as it relates to optimizing your physical and emotional wellness journey. Most informed, most trusted, and most grateful you spent this time with us today. Until next time, stay in the zone. I'm Dr. Brian Brown.